Today, we are going to be talking all about how to use AI to define and align your ICP. And we have a couple of experts on the topic here. First, we have Tareen, who is the CEO and co-founder over at Seam AI. We have Soham Maniar, who is in RevOps over at Weaviate. And we have Rowe, who is in growth over at Crescent. Mick, I'm going to turn it over to you before we get into the content, but I do want to ask one non-RevOps related thing, not professional related at all, just to kind of get us all introduced. And I specifically did not tell you that I was going to ask this question because I want to get your off the cuff responses. And Jesse is, I don't know if that's like nervous laughter or what. I feel like Soham's wheels are turning and Mick is just kind of enjoying the fact that I'm putting these guys through the ringer. So here's my question. Actually, Mick, I know you're the RevOps co-op partner and stuff here, but I'm going to start with you to give these guys at least a little bit of time to answer this. So obviously, let you add anything to that professional introduction that you want, but my non-RevOps related question for you is, we are hosting our RevOps AF conference in New Orleans in May. We're going to have 300 to 350 revenue operators. I want you to imagine that you are the opening keynote speaker for RevOps AF. And that we announce your name and everyone's in the audience cheering. They're all super excited. And you're walking onto stage, entering stage left. What would be your walk-up song that you would play as you came on stage to deliver the opening keynote at RevOps AF 2025 in New Orleans?
Wow, that is a tough one. You listen to a lot of pop punk lately from the early 2000s. So maybe like Holiday by Green Day.
I fully support that genre. Before we got on here, I was just blasting some Motion City soundtrack for anybody that knows, or the Academy is. So yeah, and actually, I don't know, I'll figure out a way if I can share this. I made yesterday for fun, I made a emo pop punk song called Don't Forget to Drink Your Water that actually slaps. It's pretty good. So I'll see if I can figure out a way to share that with you guys.
When we close out.
Yeah, there you go. Staying hydrated is very important. All right. So what about you, my friend? What would be your walk-up song?
It's got to be Rick Ross Hustlin'. It's classic walk-up song. Just the first one that came to mind. Can't ignore my first instinct.
There you go.
All right. And Jesse, round us out.
I was initially going to do Brain Stew by Green Day just because that has been in my head for the past 2 months from different video montages of sports clips. But I would have to say, given the current sentiment, Not Like Us by Kendrick. I feel like that's just the perfect thing to come out to right now.
Yep, that has also been in my head since the Super Bowl. All right, guys. Like I said, today we're going to be talking about how to use AI to define and align your ACP. Mick, I'm going to turn it over to you to get us started. But we do have, like I said, the Q&A is open. The chat is open. So as we go through this, please leave your thoughts, your questions in either the Q&A or the chat, and we will make sure that we get to them as they come up. But otherwise, Mick, take us away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mick. This session is called Using AI to Define and Align Your Ideal Customer Profile, or ICP. I'll give a little bit more background on our awesome speakers. I'm one of the co-founders of Seam AI. I'm not the CEO, Matt. I'm the COO.
I knew that as soon as I said it. I was hoping I mumbled a little bit and maybe like people were like, no, COO, but
my background is in sales. I worked at Okta for 5 years. That's where I met my co-founders. We left to start Seam AI. We're joined by 2 speakers. We have Soham, who is a RevOps leader who's worked at companies like Twitter, AWS, Mixpanel. He currently leads revenue operations and sales development at Weaviate, the go-to AI native vector database. He's focused on all things go-to-market, commercial growth, accelerating GTM with AI, really on the forefront of this AI stuff. I'm excited to get his perspective. And then we have Jesse, who is head of growth at Crescent. He's a seasoned growth leader and advisor, having served as head of growth at 6 different companies, hypergrowth brands that we've all heard of, like G2, Ramp, now Crescent. 2-time founder, HubSpot champion, ranked among Product Hunt's top 150 makers of all time. Jesse brings deep expertise in scaling revenue, driving demand, building high-performing growth engines. If you want to grow like bananas, talk to Jesse. So we have 2 great speakers. We have a RevOps perspective, sales dev perspective, pretty much just growth. So excited to talk about some of this stuff. The agenda, rethinking ICPs in the AI era. What's changed? What's different? Second section is operationalizing your ICP, and that's just a fancy way of saying how to use it to actually build pipeline. And then 3, AI's expanding role in go-to-market. This is a space that is moving very fast. There's a lot of really great stuff. There's a lot of not so great stuff. We have two really great people to talk through kind of what's real, what's not, what you can be doing right now. So we're going to expand the conversation a little bit at the end. Very quickly, just what is Seam AI? Really simply put, we're AI prospecting for sales teams. We help you build pipeline with AI agents that find and qualify accounts and leads, exactly like your best rep. If prospecting is a means to an end, and that end is talking to a prospect, Seam AI brings your humans right to that end and does all the work before. So what's changed with ICPs in the AI era? First question, ICPs have traditionally been based on firmographics. I think this is the stuff that we all know. It's like, I sell the technology companies with over 1,000 employees. I think that's kind of the old school way, and there's a new way now. Let's start with Jesse. How is AI changing that, and why does it matter?
Yeah, I think you just kind of nailed it right off the bat here. I think the easiest way to think about this is we're moving from the static ICP to more of a dynamic ICP because of what AI truly allows. As you mentioned, firmographic data is nice to have and directional, whether that's the industry, company size, or revenue of an account. But there's a lot more that you should be trying to incorporate into your ICPs. What from a behavioral intent standpoint can you include? What from a technographic standpoint? What about even the engagement data? Incorporating some of these things through AI allows you to make that a little bit more dynamic. Your ICPs are going to live and breathe as your company changes and grows. You can even include real-time signals with your actual user base and put that back into your ICP model. For example, product usage trends, hiring patterns, or even website engagement. You can use all of those signals to identify hidden correlations between your most ideal customers. So I think a lot of what we're seeing right now is we're just reducing overall human bias, which obviously increases that accuracy. You can't argue numbers, especially when it's amongst your entire data warehouse. From my opinion, moving from static to dynamic ICPs, uncovering those hidden patterns by leveraging AI across behavioral, product usage, technographic insights, the data-driven accuracy and consistency. We're removing guesswork, ensuring all of our GTM teams use the same ICP definition, and we're preventing anyone from drifting off from those targets. It just allows for precision in your actual prioritization. You can include some really robust scoring methodologies, leveraging AI to identify who the poor fit leads are and who the great ones are so you can accelerate things quicker.
Yeah. Nice. I think like one way to frame that is AI is really good at two things. One, it's getting data at scale that you maybe couldn't get before. Instead of getting stuck with, hey, this company has this many employees or this much revenue, you can start finding information on the web at scale that was not really possible before. The other piece that you're talking about, Jesse, is AI is really good at doing complex data analysis that maybe a typical non-technical RevOps person couldn't do before. That would require SQL or data resources, incorporating a lot more data and making sense of it to even narrow that ICP more. Anything you want to add?
I think Jesse nailed it, right? My 2 cents is from a personal standpoint, I've always thought of ICPs as not my favorite thing because it's always felt fundamentally backwards, especially when you join a company that's been selling for quite some time. You already know who you've sold to, you know who your most successful customers are, and yet you're forced to have this conversation of, well, how many engineers do they have in their org? And in the absence of any better data, you just kind of go with what you have, right? So it's always felt that like this antiquated way of defining something, even though you feel like there's got to be a better way to do it. I'm really excited for this next era of defining something like an ICP. It's ripe for disruption because it is important, you know, who you're selling to, what constitutes the most successful customer, the happiest customer, being honest about the ideal customer profile when you say an ICP and not just, here's who I think it is. So it's changed your access to information is how I would distill what Jesse said in my own words. And your ability to be more fluid with an ICP. There's no excuse in an AI first era to not have multiple ICPs where you're testing and iterating at the same time. It can change week to week, day to day, month to month. You should have the core foundational understanding, but whether you're a first time founder and it's just you selling your first product all the way through to a company that's been selling for 10 years, it's time to revisit how you define your ICP and the framework in which you do it.
Yeah. One way that I like to think about this is if you were to ask your best salesperson, when they look at an account, how do they determine if it is a fit or worth their time? I promise you that it's going to go deeper than how many employees they have. And if they're in the technology industry and revenue, they're digging and looking for all this really specific stuff. Tech stack, are they hiring certain roles? What product do they build? Who do they sell to? That sort of stuff is available at scale, when before you just have to have someone sitting down and going account by account. That narrowing in is now possible, where before it just really wasn't. By being able to get that data so fast and at scale, you can now iterate on it quickly, right? You're not doing a 6-month project trying to figure out what your ICP is, which is immediately stale. And then you don't want to update it because it's so much work and you made all this documentation. It's more real time, as Jesse was saying. Okay, great. How do you narrow in your ICP definition? Where do you start? How do you know it's right? You're saying you're like testing and iterating. How do you do that? High level.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's always situational to the company. Going back to Soham's comment, you'll have product marketing that leads ICP and positioning, messaging frameworks. But with this, it's a little different. When you're thinking about applying a data-driven methodology to defining those ICPs, think about all of the surface areas that you have access to as a revenue leader. Just starting off, you're going to want to centralize and enrich your data across your MarTech stack. So aggregating your CRM data, your marketing and product usage data, intent data, all of that stuff into kind of this, unified customer profile. From there, you can leverage AI to find pattern recognition or repeating occurrences within that sample size. You can feed win-loss data from deals to AI to detect different characteristics of those high-value customers. AI might reveal top customers that tend to have a specific tech stack or a key hiring role they have put out before buying. And so essentially trying to reverse engineer all of those characteristics, signals that we were just talking about, into a little bit more of distilled science, kind of like an equation almost. And from there, that's where the equation goes into effect. From there, scoring and segmenting out those ICPs, assigning an ICP fit score based off of firmographic data, behavior, real-time engagement, essentially applying the learnings that you just took from step 2 and putting that more on a proactive moving forward cadence. And then I think the other one is that we live in a time where everything is just rapidly changing so quickly. And it's type of thing of where ICPs and the person you're selling to and the value props and pain points that they have might change next week. Continuously optimizing that ICP, making it a living, breathing model within your revenue org so that you can always move to where the markets are shifting and so on with your ICPs as well.
Yeah, love hearing Jesse's growth-minded approach to it. That's the kind of like framework that I would want to work with somebody who understands, hey, how do we actually treat this like an experiment and treat it like a project we're constantly keeping the pulse on? Maybe a different way of thinking about it, depending on where everyone in the audience is in their journey. Imagine the spectrum of what I mentioned earlier. Early stage founder is on the left side and really mature sales org with a lot of sellers is on the right side. I think there's different approaches to the question of where do you start? Early stage founder, as with most things, you want to be fast, light touch, and as iterative as possible. But I think you start with, who do you think your best customer would be? And then you pattern match and move out in the concentric circles until you feel like you're hitting a limit of where you're forcing a sale. And this happens over a course of time, but you make that first sale to a customer. It's really important to understand the principle of an ICP. It's not just the best lead to close, but rather the best customer that's going to be happiest and actually have the best CAC to LTV ratio. And all those metrics suddenly come into play in a much more real way, because you can think about your ideal customer profile, not your ideal prospect profile. Your ideal customer profile is the person who's going to stay with you the longest, be happiest the longest, go spread word of mouth. They're going to pay dividends in the long run. So when you think of it from that perspective, you need to be a lot more dynamic about understanding who is the happiest customer using your product in the long run, not just the person that you were able to get to purchase it at that point in time. That's one note. On the founder side, simple, iterative, and just use your best guess and then test and iterate. On the more mature sales side, use what you've done so far. Most organizations have some sort of concept of an ICP. A perfect example at Weaviate, when I joined, we had the typical model, which was X number of engineers. This is what it looks like. Maybe they have filing that says so on and so forth. But what we quickly realized is we were selling to 2 different kinds of customers. It felt uncomfortable at first, but it's okay to have 2, 3, 4, 5 ICPs as long as you're diligent about why you're creating that many and making sure they align to your product lines and what you're actually selling. But I think what we realized is selling to the Global 2000 is a different motion, definition, set of criteria versus startups. And that's why you see companies develop startup programs and things like that. So it's not really inventing something new. It's just being more specific about what you already know to be true about your customer base, and then really testing and iterating against information that was previously unavailable, like job search signals, job posting signals, and all this kind of stuff. And, quick shout out to Seam, like an interesting aspect of our ICP testing phase that we did with the enterprise is developing something called a search score, which is, we're a search product, a vector database. We wanted to know, are companies using other things to test whether they have search internally, or do they make money off of search? And is that important to their core product? 2 years ago, you couldn't find anything in that zone or in that space in terms of, is that feasible for a company? Now with the tool like Seam, and there's others too, but with the tool like Seam, you can find that out, take a best guess, and use that as one of the many factors to say, hey, this company is kind of actively interested and would be a good fit for the long run.
Great. Thanks for the plug. I think like overall with ICPs, it's like an exercise of personalization at scale or relevance at scale when you send messaging, and like really narrow ICPs is just a really effective way to always be relevant with your messaging. Their business, their pains, and that's what your ICP should be. I think it should be that narrow, and you get a multiple of them, but to the point where you could send a template email and it probably is going to hit because you know so much about their business. That's how I think about it. All right, just real quick, difference between ICP fit and intent signals. Because it's like, maybe it's a little blurrier and there isn't like a clear line, but I do think there's a difference potentially.
I'd say from an ICP fit standpoint, that is how closely a company matches your ideal customer criteria based off of all the, firmographic, technographic, and behavior. Whereas intent signals is real-time, buying behavior and engagement cues that indicate when the prospect is in market or in that mindset to, potentially explore whatever you're selling. And that's the way I slice and dice it.
Like point in time. Is that like a... Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
All right.
I had a question for you guys. I always like to go back to square one. We had another digital event a few weeks ago that was on this topic of like zero CRM and like question like, hey, why do we even need CRMs? Like, what's the value that a CRM is supposed to provide? And so I want to ask you guys the question. I think we all take for granted that we all have an ICP for the companies that we work at or the businesses that we run. But why do we need an ICP? What are the things you can do when you have this stuff figured out that are valuable to the business? Because again, like I'm a big bias for action kind of guy. And it's like, sure, we can all go through the motions and be like, hey, my ICP is this. And it's like, cool. But what do you do with that information?
Yeah.
It's a great question.
Quick thought off the top is focus, right? Sales sells things that product isn't ready to sell, and product builds things that maybe sales isn't really selling correctly or at all. And that kind of fuzzy area tends to be a general theme. Without an ICP, I've seen, and I can imagine there tends to be a bigger lack of focus and direction when it comes to who you want to sell to, right? And again, who your most successful customers are. If you're not actively defining it and thinking about it, you're missing a really clear opportunity to get everyone on the same page. So to me, it's all about focus. Without it being there, you're just opening up avenues for people to create their own ICPs. I guess what I'm saying is it's going to happen whether you do it intentionally or not. So you might as well do it intentionally and have everyone have the same or similar definitions as opposed to creating their own.
I would go far as to say, I don't know if anyone's worked at it. If you've been hired by a company that wasn't really early stage, they do have an ICP. You probably haven't heard of any companies that didn't have an ICP because they didn't make it.
Yeah.
ICP is messy. You have one. Because companies that don't, I don't know if they really make it or rarely do.
Or maybe to go back to your question on the last slide there, Mick, about one ICP versus multiple ICPs, maybe this is another way to look at it. How narrow should we get? And maybe this leads into the next thing you guys are going to talk about around operationalizing this. But Jesse, this is a question for you. Chris in the chat brought up that they had 4, maybe 5 different ICPs at your last company. And if, I guess to Mick's point, when you kind of get at especially the personalization thing, I mean, theoretically, every prospect is unique, right? How broad or narrow should you be thinking about your ICP? Should it relate to, I don't know, different ways that you would sell, or maybe the value prop that you would be able to deliver, to Soham's point on like, hey, our product is going to do this for you, solve these particular problems, and segment things that way to develop your ICP? Like, what comes first? How should people be thinking about that in terms of breaking down from one to multiple ICPs?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think a lot of it depends on the complexity of your go-to-market strategy and where you're at from a product development standpoint. Leaning in with a single ICP allows you to be niche, highly targeted, very precise with a narrow audience, whereas the multiple ICPs, some companies at later stages need that because they have different buying segments, whether they're selling to both SMBs and enterprises, or they have, a diverse product line, or maybe they even have some geographical restrictions. There's a lot of things that you have to compare to where the company is at from a maturity standpoint and growth standpoint, and then apply that into your methodologies with these ICPs. Because it could also be the type of thing where this year in 2025, we have a big priority to move up market. We want to tap more into enterprise accounts. Well, how do we align our ICPs with that narrative so we can build this blueprint to go out and execute against? But yeah, those are my 2 cents there.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, there's 2 things that pop up, right? One is start with 1. I don't think you start with 2 or 3 hoping that it makes sense. You start with 1, and then there is a level of natural progression, and it will appear to you that, hey, I'm force fitting a different ICP into this one. It'll just start to branch out on its own. And there's also the side of what Jesse mentioned, which is your core reason we'll start to see them bifurcate and branch out is kind of sales motion and product line. I think that's a natural place to say, I'm selling to enterprise versus SMB. In the old way of defining ICPs, it would be, hey, 200 engineers is an unreasonable number for SMB ICP fit. But you may find that out sooner through behavioral and intent signals. It's not about the number of engineers, but the way they're displaying their buying intent. It happens faster. It happens in a different way. It happens in a different place. And so therefore it makes sense to kind of split out SMB. So it doesn't have to be an SMB versus enterprise ICP, but it's more just what you're selling and how you sell it to them naturally kind of allows you to split it out into an ICP.
Yeah, I think what does having really great ICP alignment unlock? Like, I'm skipping to the second question here. What's the benefit of having a really great ICP or multiple ICPs? And I think I see it from a couple different perspectives. I lean heavily on the pipe gen side because the big fat pipeline solves most of your problems. From a marketing perspective, I think what it enables is better segmentation for campaigns. And I'll give you a real example. One of our customers, they sell to AI, companies that build AI. It's like there's different types of products that use AI, and it's kind of this typical custom subcategories or sub-industries that companies will implement in their CRM. So there's technology companies, then there's AI companies underneath that, and then there's different types of AI companies underneath that. If you can effectively segment all of those companies by those custom categories, it's a whole lot easier to cut really relevant campaigns. It's a whole lot easier to write really custom messaging. So there's sort of that personalization at scale. And when I say personalization, I don't mean what college did you go to? This is a problem that you are feeling because I know a lot about your business. From a sales perspective, when a sales rep looks at an account, they know exactly which customer testimonial to send them. They know exactly how the product could help them. It's like, you already know, right, when you start calling into that account, what you could add. I haven't been in RevOps personally, so this is maybe a good one for Soham, but planning and predictability of the business, cutting territories. If you know the AR potential of a specific ICP, you're going to be able to understand, are these territories equal? Are we going to hit our number? Sort of like gives you more predictability, but I'll let Soham touch on that.
Yeah, I mean, a very real example, and I think everyone that's interacted with any sales org has seen this, like, hey, the West has all the good accounts we sell into tech, and they're all in the West. That's a problem that you can't really solve unless you try to do what we're talking about today. And, I think something I'm pretty proud of at Weaviate is we've taken a really good stab at that by rethinking the way that we organize sales. I won't give away all the secret sauce, but effectively we've used tools like Seam, Common Room, all the tools in this space to figure out, hey, we know our ICP. Now we have a list of accounts that we feel are at the top tier of that ICP based on behavioral, firmographic, technographic, all the different things that plug into this modern ICP. So we feel like these 100 accounts are the best accounts, and we don't really care where they are. They're just all over the place. So now we're going to distribute them evenly so every seller has an even shot. That's a new model that is frankly uncomfortable and kind of painful, but is better for the sales organization and therefore better for the go-to-market and revenue generation arm of the company, because you're not fighting stupid battles like, hey, my territory is better than yours, right? So I think that's one clear example. What I think people overlook is that ICP alignment allows you to unlock repeatability in a much better way. When you are clear on your ICP and you're actually aligned and you say, okay, we've closed 10 customers and we're tweaking and we're tweaking and we're tweaking that ICP until we really feel clear that our definition is not just we sell to AI startups, but we sell to AI startups. Here's the behavioral signals that they show in 3 months leading up to buying. Here's the technographic signal that they show, and here's the firmographic fit that we generally feel comfortable with. Now we feel really good about our ICP. There's nothing stopping you from then finding all the companies that live in that space and just waiting for them to fall into the fly trap, right? The repeatability is super overlooked, and frankly, the part that comes the slowest when you have an old version of an ICP, right? So.
Yeah. I also think there's a sales productivity piece. We work with a logistics company, and they want to target companies that there's a certain weight of packages that they want to target. It's a certain price or like luxury goods that this company is shipping internationally to the US. If you don't have that tagged in the CRM or a way for your salespeople to know that information at scale, they're either researching every single account or getting on calls, and then maybe by the POC, they recognize that the stuff's too light, or they sell shoes. So there's definitely a time savings element to sales as well.
Yeah. I like what you guys mentioned, because I think the first step is kind of throw the baggage we have out the door of like, these are the ways you can define your ICP. Like you said, so much more is possible today. The territories example is a really good one. It used to be the easiest way was geography, zip code, right? Based on where your company HQ is. We'll carve things that way, put them on a nice little map, right? Like easy, right? But produces all of these other problems. And Mick, I like the example you gave. Here's a question for you. As people think about ways they can start to rethink their ICP, like that example you gave of the logistics company and like the weight of packages, like I envision that being something that you'd have to get on a call to ask and get answers. So is that the way people should start thinking about this? To define my ICP, what are the things that today I need to ask a human to answer? And then are there ways that I can somehow get at that information without needing to get on a phone call? Is that the right way for people to be thinking?
Yeah. Step one is right. If you ask your best salesperson, what do you wish you knew about every single account in your territory? Don't worry about how you get the information. What do you wish you knew about every single account? Make a list and then start to investigate how you can get that information. It's a brave new world out there, and the information you can get is very different than what it used to be 5 years ago. A customer of ours looks at the ARR potential of an account by how much data does the company produce in terabytes a year. And it's like, okay, I probably need to talk to someone on the phone about that, or maybe even no one at the company knows that answer. But what's really great about using AI to get some of this information is that it can research, evaluate that research, and come to conclusions just like a human would. Sometimes this information, like weight of parcels, maybe it doesn't live anywhere online, but you could say, okay, with AI, you could say, what does this company sell? Like, what's the average weight of that item? And we can say, okay, this is the weight of that package. And so you can start getting this information at scale that maybe you wouldn't be able to get before, and isn't necessarily like something you found on a website or you got from a phone call, but it's directionally right. And if you can get that across 10,000 accounts, you're going to do a better job of cutting territories. You're going to do a better job of prioritizing accounts, a whole lot of downstream impacts there. But it's like, what do you want to know about every single account? And then start to figure out how you can use AI to get that information at scale. And I really do think it's different than it was a couple of years ago. Anything you want to add on this, Jesse? Any projects or experiments you've ran with this stuff?
I think one thing that I always think about with this is not having a well-refined ICP that you have full conviction in is the loss leader itself, because that trickles down throughout the entire revenue org. Your marketing team is going to be marketing to the wrong people. They're going to be wasting spend. They're going to be wasting time on the campaigns they're creating. It's going to have lower engagement. Sales, they're going to have, lower close won rates. Pipeline velocity is, and deal velocity is going to slow down, probably not have as high as ACV as you could. There is definitely some opportunity cost here by chasing down the wrong ICPs. It's one of those things that you could quantify, like how much time have we wasted selling to the wrong prospect over the past year? How do we fix that in 2025?
I have one thought on number 3 here. What's an easy thing that companies could do right now to improve either their ICP definition, alignment, get ahead of that problem that you just mentioned, Jesse? Keep it simple.
Yeah, I have a quick thought is just back to kind of what I said is customer profile, not prospect profile. Go to your three happiest customers who have paid you the most, been there the longest, upsold the most, best NRR, however you're able to define it. They're probably the ones you have the best relationship and the one you're able to kind of openly speak to. Ask them at the time of buying, what problems were they having? Figure out where those problems lived. Were they on Reddit looking down endless rabbit holes trying to figure out stuff? There's tools for that. Were they just searching certain pages for documentation? Were they posting jobs and nobody was applying? Like every single thing you could probably get them to talk about, you can quantify and fit back into your ICP and understand where those behaviors live. Start with your happiest customers because you clearly solved a problem for them at the point of buying and then did it over and over again to the point where they kept paying you more money. You want to find more of those and you want to find what problem you solve for them at the time of buying. I think that's super easy. I mean, that's like get your founder to send 3 emails and you'll get an answer and hop on a call and just do some basic user interviews. And you can do that whether you've been selling for 20 years or 2 months.
Level. You got anything?
I think just one easy thing, kind of mentioned it earlier, but centralizing all of that ICP data into one source. So aggregating CRM, marketing, product usage, intent data into a unified customer data platform that will enable all the things that we're talking about here. And then from there, use AI to essentially analyze closed won deals in the past year, and then maybe compare that to lifetime, and then adjust, the ICP criteria based off of the success patterns you find there. But I think, the last part of this, my favorite, is just behavioral signals and incorporating that. It's a little bit difficult, but essentially listing out all the different signals that you can collect and score, and then figuring out which one of those has the highest potency or most correlation to getting someone to convert or close.
I have a question for you guys on segmenting and refining your ICPs. Mick, you brought up how ICP development, right? You said a giant pain in the butt, typically a lot of work, manual, time intensive. So kind of a one and done sort of scenario a lot of times, or maybe like, oh, once a year we'll update this, right? And you do this big project or this big analysis. That's not. So how do you guys today refine or I guess analyze your ICP? Is it a continuous ongoing thing? Do you have stuff built that way where it's just constantly iterating? And then second question is, I think about segmenting ICPs, and what I mean by that is, should people be looking at things of like, to your point, here's what our most successful customers look like and what their profile is, but then compare that against maybe bad fit customers as well. And then the third thing I'd ask is like new customers that you have coming in the door, just because we all are talking about how quickly things are changing, especially if you're an early stage or growth stage company, your buyer or that profile could be changing, or what you could be learning about your ICP profiles. What do you guys do there today on the continuous iteration front? And do you segment your ICPs at all? Good fit versus bad fit versus those that are new coming in?
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts there? Either one of you?
Yeah. In terms of good fit versus bad fit, right? It really does depend where you are as a company and who you're selling to. In the beginning, getting those reps in and selling is important. Trust your instinct and sell early and often without abusing the power. I do think every single time a practical thing that I can do as an ops person, and different people in different organizations can do this. There's no kind of limit to this, but the second anytime a deal closes, my first instinct is to go into where we house a lot of our intent stuff is Common Room, but there's other tools too, is to go into Common Room and take a look at what that account was displaying at the time, because very quickly that stuff gets lost. Signals are different. For example, when they close a deal, the product usage might spike as if they get a bunch of people get added, right? So you're going to lose that important information very quickly. I immediately take a look at that, and something I'm pushing the teams at Common Room and other tools like this to do is to help us kind of get historical tracking on things like your scores, so you can see how they fluctuate over time and how they correlate to your buying signals. Ingesting that at the time of sale is really important, and understanding what their journey looked like up to the buying signal. In terms of bad fit versus good fit, you won't really know until you have some bad fits. So I think it's just about taking those as they come and saying, hey, we had a churn. Was that intentional churn or was that unintentional? And what happened? If it was unintentional, what did we do on our side? I think those typical exercises are really, really helpful. A very simple one that you can learn from and adjust your ICP is funding, as an example. If you sell to a bunch of startups and we're going through a hot cycle, the ones with funding are going to spend a ton. If you have a very cost heavy tool that you're sending to them, and for example, they have to be on AWS at the same time that they're using a vector database and their AWS bill is skyrocketing and they're paying us, and then suddenly they get no more funding, you're gonna have a problem. Now, does that mean that one sale was bad? I don't know. Does that mean we don't sell to companies that raised under 5 million? I don't know, right? I think that's where it's a little bit of art, a little bit of science, but it's important to do the exercise. So I think in terms of bad and good fit, like that's just a practical example that we've actually seen. And I think taking those learnings and then ingesting them back into your score to say, hey, maybe that's a different ICP and we come up with a different motion to go sell to those with a self-serve model and not enterprise, because it just doesn't make sense to them. But it all comes back into your scoring and how you think about it.
I'll take one more crack at the answer, Matt. Redefining your ICP doesn't mean you need to make it really complicated with a million inputs. I think that's important. When I was selling Okta, it was like, are they rolling out Office 365? Because then they need to connect SSO to the cloud, period. That was it. Give me one or two or three attributes that you really want to zero in on. I think how you start to explore and test it is like the scientific method. Find your 3 hypotheses about attributes of a company. You can use something like SIEM or one of the other tools out there to enrich a bunch of accounts with that attribute. And then you track them over a quarter and you say, did they close? Did they not close? And you can start to understand the accounts that did have over 50 salespeople and moved really fast in the deal cycle. They closed or they got called out immediately. So it's, what are your hypotheses? Get it into Salesforce, get it into HubSpot, tag the account, watch what happens, and then you get some data on it. And that's a really kind of tactical way to do this that we've helped some customers with. It's like, what is your ICP? I don't know. What do you think it is? Let's test it.
Yeah. I think just going back to what Matt was commenting on, the cadence of how you should update your ICP. But I'm kind of a firm belief now of running like quarterly audits, essentially, where you're comparing that closed won data, all the deal data. And you're also kind of, you're bringing this quantification, but you're also bringing some qualification or some qualitative data that you're directly collecting from reps or AEs. Basically seeing, does this narrative from the data to what they're saying align? Are there some gaps that we still have to refine with our ICP targeting or our internal sales motion?
We do have one question for you guys. Chris was asking about centralizing ICP data. It depends on how you define your ICP, but asking if anyone's used a specific product or tool for this across your tech stack, or if you've built something homegrown. How are you guys doing that in practice? My initial reaction to this is that, especially with today, there's not necessarily a single source of truth. It's like this kind of distributed source of truth. So like your ICP data can be surfaced in kind of any tool that your team is currently using. It probably do have a data warehouse or something where a bunch of stuff all gets put. It can live and get distributed to any other tool that is out there. What's your guys' answers to that question about centralizing the data?
A log of all the criteria that you would fit in your ICP and a column that says, where does that criteria live today? Majority wins, right? So if you have 10 different criteria and 6 of them live in HubSpot, just make HubSpot your central source. That'll allow you to go with the flow of whatever's easiest today. If you have resources and budget and you're looking in the right tool, I think tools like Common Room, Pocus are really, really interesting in this space. And just speaking from my own personal use, I've used Common Room and I think it's the easiest way to get started with real signals. If you're looking to go like really approach your TAM from 0 to 1, then Seam has a TAM builder that they've built that I think is like really an interesting way to approach it too. But I would start with just again, put pen to paper and just figure out what is your ICP? What do you think it is? And what do you know for sure? Where does that criteria live today? Start there.
Yeah, you nailed it, Soham. I would also echo Common Room. I also echo the SIEM aspect as well. It's just nice when you can integrate this piece, and I don't have to go bother engineering with some integration for data like you had to do a few years back. So yeah.
I'm having flashbacks now, but thanks for that, Jesse. Nightmarish flashbacks of all of those requests to my data engineering team that ultimately went ignored because they had other higher priority things to do.
Absolutely. How goes?
That was the origin story of Seam AI. My CEO, Nick, was on the data team at Okta and was like, why can't anyone do this stuff on their own?
Yeah. Can you just do this yourself? please.
All right, we have 9 minutes. If anyone has questions, we can stop and address them. Let's just open this up a little bit and talk about AI because it's fun and it's exciting. The last thing I'll say is that once you get this ICP stuff down in your CRM or whatever your source of truth is, it unlocks a lot of automation. The systems know what accounts are good and what are bad and what to focus on and what to say. That's how you really start to automate a lot of these, pipeline generating flows. This is step one. Get the data right. Tag your accounts. Anyway. What should every marketing, sales, SDR, and RevOps team be using regarding AI right now? What's exciting? What's useful? You guys don't have to say CMA.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I think obviously ICP refinement, but I think outside of that, audience segmentation, obviously the personalization, what you're going to do there is just increase engagement and efficiency than you would otherwise. But yeah, I think that's the core components there for marketing. For sales specifically, you have everything from AI-based lead scoring to prioritization to real-time intent tracking, all making sure that your reps are focused on those high-fit accounts. For SDRs, I think, it's some of the AI-powered email sequencing. It's also some of the automated research that you can conduct for those SDRs. And then one other one that is very similar, and this is what we've implemented here at Crescent, is essentially like call coaching. Every single call is recorded and that goes somewhere where we train our calls over time. We're constantly refining how we pitch and showcase the product. It definitely goes a long way, especially for more early stage or early in their career sales reps. And then, RevOps, that's everything from attribution modeling to forecasting to then the last one, which matters the most, is pipeline optimization. Is our model as sound as what we're actually putting top of funnel to converting at the bottom?
Yeah, all those 100% agree. Some names I'll just kind of like spitball. I've mentioned Seam, I've mentioned Common Room a ton. Clay is great. I'm sure everybody has heard about Clay by now, but anything that can allow you to self-serve some of this stuff, you should absolutely just go test it out. Everything has a freemium version at this point or close to it. So I would definitely go play around with that. Underrated last one I'll throw out is a call recording tool called Sybil, which is pretty sick. I've used Gong, Clary, and all the other ones out there. Sybil is kind of like a smaller team. They're really lean. They're shipping a lot of really cool stuff. It's been pretty cool to use for a lot of our call recordings. We use that one exclusively at Weaviate, which has been fun. Sybill. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, my last response was to a different question. Sybil is the tool I was talking about for call recordings. It's an amazing product. We use default.com for basically all of our scheduling and routing, which is great for us because they have some native AI components to immediately identify if someone is potentially a self-service versus sales-led lead and get them to their destination quicker. And then another one, napkin.io, a big fan of that. They're a new tool that allows you to essentially create infographics and creative images from words. So I could put together a bunch of stats and it'll put together something nicely.
Cool. All right. I really think this next wave of AI is about automating workflows that were maybe a little bit too hard to automate before, but can be automated now. Look at your org and say, okay, what are processes that are a means to an end, where they in themselves are not valuable, and that almost you could automate them before with like a Zapier, but you just couldn't because it took a little bit too much intelligence. That's the stuff that you could just take off people's plates. There are kind of two different flavors of AI tools out there. There's tools that want to make your people more efficient, and then there's tools that want to replace people, and both are good for different types of companies depending on what you're trying to do. It's just when you evaluate tools, it's like, which one are they going for? Because they're different. That's the last thing I'd say.
I liked what you brought up before, Mick, about going back to the prospecting. I was thinking of all these workflows and other things that I've built. As you're building these workflows or automations, you're trying to account for some nuances we talked about before. If they do this, put them over here. But if they don't put them over here, all these things can really complicate. Like you can see how that can spiderweb super quickly. Where if you just go back to the beginning and you're like, no, we're going to eliminate all of that. And it's like, just start with a list of good fit accounts and people. And then that workflow or automation becomes so much easier. I think that's the power of what a good ICP can do for you. The world looks very different today. I think it'll look very different in another 12 months. But guys, thank you very much for dropping some knowledge on us today. I really appreciate it. But Mick, Soham, and Jesse, that is all I got for you. Thank you guys. Really appreciate it. But nothing else here. I'll let you guys go. I'll see you on the flip side, and to all the attendees out there, thank you very much as well.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.